The prison transport ship moved slowly through the stars, its engines humming like a tired breath inside the ship. Prisoners were locked behind glowing energy bars, each one dangerous in their own way. But in the back of the ship, inside a reinforced metal cage, sat a girl no one dared to touch. She was small, thin, and covered in faint blue markings. Her silver-white hair was messy, and her eyes glowed like fire under moonlight. But it wasn't her looks that made people fear her. It was her teeth. She had bitten everyone. One guard lost a finger. Another had deep marks on his arm. She even bit a medic who tried to feed. Her name wasn't listed, just a number. Prisoner X71. But everyone whispered the same word when they walked past her cage. Monster? She didn't speak, only growled like an animal. Whenever someone came close, she would lunge forward, smashing into the bars, and when they backed away, she would smirk like it gave her power. She enjoyed their fear, or maybe she needed it. No one knew why she acted this way. Some said she was born savage. Others said she went mad after torture in the camps. Then, one day, a new passenger stepped on board. He was human, tall, but not big, with old mining clothes and a calm face. He carried a worn-out bag and said nothing to anyone. The guards nodded at him and pointed to an empty seat. It was the one closest to her cage. Everyone expected him to refuse, but he didn't. He just sat down, silent. Resting his hands on his knees, the alien girl noticed him right away. She moved closer to the bars, her eyes watching him like a predator. Then she did what she always did. She lunged forward and snapped her teeth. Everyone turned, expecting a scream, or at least a jump. But the human didn't flinch. He didn't blink, didn't move, didn't even raise an eyebrow. He just looked at her, calm and quiet. She stopped, confused. It was the first time someone didn't react. She leaned back slowly, blinking at him, unsure. Why didn't he fear her? She sat down again, closer to the bars this time. She growled softly, testing him, but he still didn't move. His eyes stayed locked with hers, calm and steady. There was no anger, no fear, no hate, just stillness. The guards laughed nervously. Looks like the beast met her match. One said, but the human said nothing. The other passengers watched too, whispering among themselves. They were scared of her, but now they were curious about him. Who was this man? Why didn't he react like the others? The girl tilted her head, her sharp teeth showing again. She didn't bite this time, just stared. Then she slowly reached out and touched the energy bars. A small spark zapped her finger and she pulled it back, hissing. The human blinked, then calmly pulled a cloth from his bag and handed it to a nearby guard. "Give this to her," he said. The guard frowned. "Are you crazy?" "She'll bite my whole arm off." "She won't," the man replied, his voice soft but sure. After a moment, the guard sighed and carefully handed the cloth through a feeding slot. The girl grabbed it quickly, sniffing it. It smelled like oil and dust like work. Not fear. She didn't bite, didn't growl. She just wrapped the cloth around her hand and touched the bars again. No shock this time. She smiled a small, strange smile. Then looked at the man again. Something in her eyes had changed. Later that night, as the lights dimmed and passengers slept, the girl didn't sleep. She stayed close to the bars, watching him, and for the first time, she whispered something. It was quiet, broken language. But the human understood. "Why you not fear me?" He opened one eye and said softly, "Because I've seen worse monsters than you." She didn't know if that was a compliment or an insult, but she didn't growl again. She sat down, quiet, holding the cloth. The cage felt less cold, and for the first time, the biting girl didn't bite anyone. She just watched the human and waited. Something inside her, something long buried, had begun to wake up again. Not rage, not pain, but something softer, something almost forgotten. Hope. The girl didn't sleep that night. She stayed close to the cage bars, silent and watchful. Her glowing eyes never left the human sitting just a few feet away, even when his head tilted forward and he drifted into sleep. She kept staring. There was something strange about him, not in his face or his voice, but in his stillness. He didn't act like the others. Didn't laugh at her, didn't fear her. She didn't understand it, and that made her restless in the morning. The ship's lights flickered back on, signaling a new cycle. Prisoners groaned. And stretched in their seats, guards checked weapons. But the human was already awake, quietly watching the stars outside the window. His face was unreadable, like a calm lake with secrets hidden beneath. The girl growled softly, testing him again. He turned his head, looked straight at her, and said nothing. No insult, no warning, no fear, just calm eyes. She pressed her face close to the bars, then mimicked him. She copied the way he breathed, the way he held his hands. It made her feel strange, like she was learning something new, something not wild, something human. The guards noticed, but said nothing. They didn't care what monsters did as long as there was no trouble. But the other passengers were curious. They leaned in their seats and whispered. She bit the last three who looked at her. Why does she only stare at him now? Maybe he's a scientist, controlling her with drugs. No one dared ask him directly. During the meal break, a service bot rolled by with trays of food. Each tray was shoved through small doors near each cage. The girl didn't touch hers. At first, she just watched the human as he slowly opened his own tray and took a bite. Then, silently, she did the same. One bite, then two. Her eyes never leaving him. He glanced at her once, then offered half his bread to a thin alien boy beside him. The boy took it with wide eyes and thanked him. The girl paused mid-bite, watching that act carefully. No one gave food on this ship, not unless they wanted something in return. Later, when the lights dimmed again for rest cycle, the girl spoke. Her voice was soft, broken, but clear. You, human, strange. He didn't look at her right away, but said, so are you. She blinked, confused by the answer. I bite, I attack, she said. You know, afraid? No, he replied simply. Because you're not the one I should. Fear, she leaned back, resting against the cold wall of her cage. The silence between them was not heavy, was thoughtful. Like two minds reaching out across a broken bridge, she tried another question, slow and careful. You? Speak my tongue. Why? He looked at her now, eyes soft, voice quiet. I've worked in your territories once. During the old war, her body tensed. War bad. Yes, he said. Very bad. She stared hard at him, her claws twitching. You hurt my kind. He shook his head slowly. I built shelters, not weapons. The girl narrowed her eyes, unsure whether to believe him, but his face stayed calm. And his eyes didn't lie, not like the ones who wore smiles while burning. Homes not like the soldiers who laughed as they locked her family in cages. You saw camps? She asked, voice shaking. He nodded once. She looked away, her jaw tight. Then you know why I bite. He didn't answer right away, then said softly, yes, I know. Her hands trembled a little, but she hid them under her arms. No one had ever said that to her before, not the guards, not the doctors. They all called her wild, broken, dangerous, but not him. He said, I know. Like he had seen it too, felt it too, and maybe he had. The transport ship suddenly shifted, changing direction. A mechanical voice announced. Rerouting due to unrest at border station Thatton 9. Guards looked at each other with concern. Okay. One of them muttered, pirates probably hit. Another dock, the passengers grew tense. The human didn't react. He simply leaned back in his seat and closed his eyes. The girl watched him with confusion, not afraid. She asked. Fear doesn't change anything, he replied. She thought about that, turning the words in her head. Fear was all she had known for so long. But this human, he moved without it, like a stone in a storm. And for some reason, she didn't want to bite him anymore. She wanted to understand him when sleep finally came to her. It was light, uneasy, but her last thoughts were not of cages or pain. They were of this strange human with silent eyes, and how, for the first time, she felt seen, not as a beast, but as someone who had survived. The ship glided through space, but the air inside felt heavier than before. After the sudden route change, fear had returned to the passengers. Guards walked faster, gripping their weapons tight. Some whispered that the outer colonies had fallen, that pirates now ruled half the trade lanes, but the human didn't seem worried. He simply sat still, breathing slowly, watching the dark stars pass beyond the window. The girl stayed close to the bars again. She didn't growl, didn't bare her teeth. She just watched him, quiet, thoughtful, almost calm. Her cage had not changed, but something inside her had. When the guards walked by, she didn't lunge. When passengers stared at her, she didn't snarl. And when the human turned his head slightly to look at her, she said in a small voice, "You?" "Different," he nodded once. "You too." She sat down, crossing her legs like she saw him do. Her voice shook, but she kept talking. Once, "I not bite," she said. Before war, he didn't reply, just listened. She took that as a sign to continue. "My name was Lyra," she whispered. Long ago, the human blinked, quietly repeating, "Lyra." She closed her eyes. "I had mother, had father, small brother." Her hands clutched the bars gently now. "They took us. Soldiers. Said we were needed." His face stayed still, but inside, something stirred. He had heard similar stories on refugee planets. He had seen children locked in cold medical chambers. He didn't ask questions. He just waited. "They put metal in my back," Lyra continued. "Touching the back of her neck made me stronger, faster, but her fingers curled like claws also made me hurt." She opened her mouth slightly, showing sharp teeth. Bite was not gifted, was curse. The human leaned forward slightly. "You bite because of what they did to you?" She nodded. "First I bite guards, then doctors, then anyone." Her voice broke. "I forget who I was." He looked at her without pity, but with something else, understanding. "You remembered your name," he said. "That's the first step." Lyra blinked, as if no one had ever spoken that gently to her. Her voice became softer. "You. Not like others." "Why?" The human took a breath. "I lost someone too," he said. "Long ago." She tilted her head, waiting. "She was a child from the war." He said, "I helped rescue her, trained her to walk again, speak again. She was strong," he added, "like you." Lyra didn't know what to say. His voice was calm. His eyes carried deep pain, pain like hers, maybe worse. Because he had chosen to help others and still lost someone, a long silence passed. Between them, only the soft hum of the ship's engines filled the air. Then Lyra asked, "Did she bite too?" He chuckled, a dry, quiet laugh. "No," he said. She smiled. Lyra looked down. "I don't know how to smile." "You will," he said, "one day." And somehow she believed him. The lights flickered again, and this time, the voice over the speaker sounded alarmed. "Prepare for docking delay. Scanners report nearby vessel no signal ID." Guards stood up at once, locking armor pieces to their uniforms. "Could be pirates," one muttered, "or worse." The passengers began to panic, voices rising. One screamed, another fainted. Lyra stood up in her cage, eyes narrowing, her body tensed. Not from fear but instinct. She had felt this before. Trouble was coming. One guard accidentally knocked over a chair and shouted, "Weapons ready. Don't open any cages." But in the chaos, someone tripped and slammed into the wall panel. Lyra's cage hissed, and sparked. The door popped open an inch. The guard closest to her froze, not move. Everyone expected her to leap out and bite him. Everyone waited for the monster to return, but Lyra didn't move. She looked at the human. He stood up slowly and said, "Your choice now." Lyra breathed heavily, her claws digging into her own arms. She could run, fight, bite. Or she could stay. The ship shook again, this time, hard. Something hit the outer hull. An emergency red light began flashing. All passengers brace for impact, the voice called out. Unknown vessel making contact. The human didn't flinch. He looked at her, and for a second, just a second, he gave her a tiny smile. Not out of joy, but out of trust, and Lyra. She did something strange. She nodded, then stepped back inside the cage and pulled the door shut herself. The guards stared in shock. "Why'd she do that?" the human replied. "Because she's not the monster you think," as alarms rang louder, and the unknown ship docked with theirs. Lyra stayed inside her cage, eyes locked on the man who never looked away. She had told her story. She had remembered her name, and now she waited. Not to survive, but to protect. Something was coming, but she was no longer just a biting girl. She was Lyra, and she had someone worth trusting. The red lights kept flashing. As the ship rocked again, people were screaming, guards shouting orders. The ship's speaker crackled, then said with a warning tone, "Unidentified vessel has locked onto our hull. Prepare for possible breach." Lyra gripped the metal bars of her cage tightly, even though the door was slightly broken. She stayed inside. She could have run, could have bitten someone, escaped into the chaos, but she didn't. She kept her eyes on the human across from her. He wasn't moving fast. He wasn't panicking like the others. He was watching, waiting, like he had seen this kind of danger before. The guards were running now, sealing doors, loading weapons. One of them barked. "All prisoners to stay locked. If they escape, shoot them first," another shouted back. "Lyra's door is damaged. I'll fix it later." She moves. Drop her. But Lyra didn't move. The human walked over to the nearby panel, pressing his palm against it. A holographic map flickered to life, showing where the breach was happening. "Cargo Bay 3, he whispered. "They're not just raiding, they're here to take prisoners." Lyra tilted her head. "How you know?" He looked back at her. "I've seen it before. These kinds of ships, they're slavers." Lyra's eyes narrowed. Not fear, anger. Not for herself, but for the children. The weak, the ones who couldn't fight. Her hands tightened into fists. A loud bang echoed through the ship, then another. The lights blinked off, then back on. A door in the far corridor was torn open with a sharp metallic scream. Figures entered, tall, armored, masked. They carried shock rods and net guns. The pirates had arrived. Screaming filled the air. Some prisoners tried to run, but were zapped and knocked cold. A guard fired a shot, but was tackled to the floor. The pirates were moving fast, sweeping the ship section by section. One pirate moved near Lyra's cage. He looked inside, saw her crouching in the dark, and sneered, "A little beast." He chuckled, "Might sell well." He reached for the broken door, but before he touched it, a hand grabbed his shoulder from behind. The human, silent as ever, smashed a steel pipe into the pirate's neck. The pirate dropped with a grunt. Lyra's eyes widened. "You fight," she said, surprised. "I survive," he replied, handing her the fallen pirate's shock rod. She took it slowly, her claws brushing against his fingers. "No more cage?" she asked. He nodded once. "Only if you choose it." Lyra stepped out for the first time in days. No bars, no rules, no collar, just space and danger. And beside her, the human, standing like a quiet wall between her and the chaos. More pirates were coming. Blasters echoed in the hallway. The human turned and pointed this way. Lyra followed without question. They moved through narrow corridors, stepping over unconscious guards and broken robots. At one junction, they found 3 passengers hiding, 2 children and an old woman. The pirates were approaching from behind. Fast, Lyra looked at them, then at the human. He didn't say a word, but his eyes said enough. She stepped forward, lifting the shock rod. Her eyes glowed with fury when the pirates turned the corner. They didn't expect what came next. Lyra moved like lightning, striking knees, elbows, throats. She didn't bite. Not once. She fought with control, with focus. The pirates fell back. Confused by her speed, shocked by her power. One tried to shoot, but the human disarmed him with a quick move and slammed him into the wall. The children stared at Lyra, terrified at first, but then one of them whispered, "She saved us." Lyra turned to them, breathing heavily. She didn't smile, but she nodded. That was enough. They kept moving. Dodging fires and broken wires, the pirates were losing ground, unsure how a prisoner and a miner were turning the tide. More guards began joining in, inspired by what they saw. A prisoner protecting civilians, a human leading them through darkness. Finally, they reached the control room. The human hacked the panel while Lyra stood guard. He triggered an emergency pulse. A signal burst out to nearby Alliance patrol. Ship's help was coming, but the pirates knew it too. They made one last push toward the escape pods. Lyra and the human chased after them. Before the pirates could grab the children again, Lyra roared not like a beast, but like a warrior. She struck with fury and purpose, her eyes glowing like stars. No one was taken that day, not while she was there. Not while the human stood beside her. As the enemy ship detached and fled, Alliance patrols arrived. The passengers were safe. The ship was saved, and Lyra stood in the hallway. Bruised, but proud, she looked down at her hands. No blood, no bites, only strength and purpose. She looked up at the human. He gave a small nod. "You did good," he said. Lyra didn't smile, but her eyes said everything. For the first time, she had fought not to hurt, but to protect, and it felt right. The ship was a mess. Broken wires sparked in the ceiling. Black smoke drifted down the halls. Lights flickered in and out, and the floor shook with every system error. But the human walked with calm steps, and Lyra followed him like a shadow. No longer a prisoner, no longer a threat. She was something else, now something stronger. They passed bodies of stunned pirates and frightened passengers. Many stared as Lyra moved past them. Some backed away in fear. Others whispered with wide eyes, "That's her, the biting girl." She helped fight them off. She didn't bite anyone this time. Lyra heard every word. Her ears twitched, her claws curled, but she kept walking, head high, eyes forward. She didn't know if they hated her or feared her or thanked her. All she knew was that the human was still beside her, and for now, that was enough. The guards were regrouping, but they were weak. Many had been injured in the first wave. Others had locked themselves inside compartments. Cowards, Lyra thought. But the human didn't judge them. He only looked at the map again. "There's a second wave," he said quietly. "They're still here." Lyra leaned over to see. Blips on the map were moving toward the engine room. She narrowed her eyes. "They tried take ship." "Yes," he replied. "Or destroy it if they can't." She didn't wait for orders. She just took off running down the dark hallway. The human followed without hesitation. Their footsteps echoed in the narrow metal corridor. Lights above them blinked and sparked as they moved in the distance. They could hear the clash of metal and shouting near a supply room. They found a group of frightened passengers. One of them, a small child, was crying, hiding under a bench. Lyra stopped, knelt down, and reached out her hand slowly. The child looked at her, scared, but Lyra didn't growl. Didn't bare her teeth, she only whispered, "Safe now." The child stared. Then reached out and touched her claw. The others began to relax. They saw her now not as a beast, but as a shield. The human nodded. "Stay here," he told them. "We'll stop the rest." They ran again. Faster now. Smoke filled the air. And the hall ahead was lit only by the red emergency lights at the far end. 3 pirates were planting charges near a control panel. Lyra growled low in her throat before the human could. "Stop her." She dashed forward. She didn't scream, she didn't roar, she just moved. Her body slammed into the first pirate, knocking him flat. She grabbed the second one by the wrist and twisted his weapon away. The third turned to shoot, but the human's pipe flew through the air and cracked against his head. Silence followed, except for the quiet hum of the broken lights. Lyra stood over the stunned pirates, chest rising and falling fast. She didn't bite them. She didn't even hurt them more than needed. She just breathed, controlled, focused. She looked back at the human, eyes unsure. He gave her a look not of praise, but of respect. "You didn't need to bite," he said. She nodded. "No need," she replied. "They not worth it." They disabled the charges, then moved to the main engine corridor. There, more pirates were waiting, but this time the guards joined in too. Seeing Lyra and the human leading the charge gave them courage. In the dark halls of the ship, the battle became fierce. Blasters fired in bursts. Electric rods sparked. Fists slammed into walls. Lyra moved like a shadow, fast and smart. She didn't fight like a beast, she fought like a soldier. Every step she took was to protect, not to destroy. A pirate tried to grab her from behind. She spun and kicked him. Down another raised a blade. She ducked and punched him in the gut. And all the while, the human stayed near, blocking shots, helping the weak. They fought like a team. They didn't speak much. They didn't need to. Eventually, the pirates realized they were outmatched. With a loud clank, their ship detached from the hull and flew off into the stars. The Alliance patrols were only minutes away. It was over. Lyra stood in the hallway, her body aching, her breath shaky, her clothes were torn. Her arms bruised, but she stood tall. The guards looked at her now, not with fear, but with something close to respect. One of them stepped forward. "You saved lives," he said. "You didn't have to." Lyra looked at the human. He said nothing, just gave her a look that told her, "You chose this." She turned back to the guard. "I want to protect, not bite," she said. He nodded slowly, unsure. But the others around him murmured an agreement. They had seen it. They had seen the truth. The biting girl was gone. Stood before them now was something else. A fighter. A protector, a survivor, and in the middle of the wrecked ship. Surrounded by broken metal and blinking lights, Lyra finally took a breath, and for the first time. It didn't taste like fear. The ship was quiet again. The pirates had fled. The alarms had stopped. Only the low hum of damaged engines filled the air. The passengers, the guards, and even the crew moved slowly now. They were bruised, tired, and shaken, but they were alive. In the middle of the hallway stood Lyra. Not in a cage, not behind bars. She stood free, tall and silent. Her claws were scratched, her clothes torn, but her eyes were calm. Around her, no one dared speak at first. They looked at her not with fear, but with something new, something unsure, something shifting. The guards gathered at one end of the corridor. Whispers passed between them. "She saved us. She fought better than most of us, but she's still dangerous." One of the officers stepped forward, a tall woman with dark armor and sharp eyes. "Prisoner X-71, she said. Voice firm. Return to your cell until Alliance command arrives." Lyra didn't move. She just stared at the officer. Then, slowly looked at the human. The man stepped in between them. Calm as ever. She has a name, he said. The officer blinked. Excuse me? He looked her in the eye. Her name is Lyra. A long silence followed. Then one of the junior crew pulled out a data tablet. Wait, he said, tapping the screen. There's an old report here. A missing child file from the war. He turned the screen around, showing a photo. It was small, blurry, but the features matched a younger version of Lyra, smiling softly. Standing beside two adults with blue markings like hers, the officer stepped closer, squinting at the photo. This can't be, she muttered. It is, the human said quietly. She wasn't born a prisoner. Or a beast. She was taken. Lyra didn't speak. Her breath was tight in her chest, her claws trembling. She hadn't seen that image. In years, she didn't even know it still existed. She was just a child, he continued. Then the labs turned her into a weapon. She's not the one who should be in a cage. The officer stepped back, clearly shaken, around them. The others started murmuring again, not cruel whispers, this time curious ones. Soft ones. She was a girl, not a monster. She was one of the stolen. No wonder she fought like that. Lyra's throat tightened. She had spent years being called it beast thing, but now someone said her name. Lyra, not number, not threat, just Lyra. Her knees nearly buckled, but the human gently placed a hand on her back. He didn't push, didn't speak. Just stood beside her, solid as always. Finally, the officer cleared her throat. I can't give full release without command approval, she said slowly. But she's not to be locked in a cage again. She turned to the other guards. She's to stay under observation. With him, the human nodded. Lyra didn't understand all the words, but she understood enough. They were giving her space, not freedom, but not chains either. It was something in between. And for now, that was more than enough. Later, in the ship's medbay, Lyra sat on the edge of a soft bench. A medical drone scanned her wounds and applied healing gel to her arms. She winced once, but didn't complain. The human sat nearby, watching her quietly. You didn't have to stand up for me, she said. He tilted his head. Yes, I did. Why? She asked. Everyone else saw me as danger. Because I saw the moment you chose to protect instead of bite, he replied. And because I've known too many people who never got that chance? Lyra lowered her eyes. You gave me my name back, she said softly. He smiled faintly. No. You never lost it too, just forgot how to use it. For a while, they said nothing. The ship floated quietly through space. Patched and bruised, but steady, people slowly returned to their stations. The halls were no longer filled with screams, but with quiet rebuilding. Later that night, Lyra walked to the small viewing window near the sleeping quarters. She stared out at the stars, her reflection faint in the glass. She didn't look like the girl in the photo. She looked older, harder, scarred, but also stronger. The human joined her there, holding 2 cups of warm tea. He handed one to her. She sniffed it carefully, then took a sip. It was bitter, but warm. She didn't speak. He didn't either. They just stood there, watching the stars. She wasn't in a cage anymore. She wasn't a monster. She wasn't just a memory from a war. She was Lyra, and someone had said her name again. That changed everything. The rescue ship arrived 2 hours after the pirates had fled. Bright lights filled the dark sky as the Alliance patrol docked beside the damaged transport. Medical teams rushed aboard, checking the injured, calming the frightened. Soldiers moved in to question the crew, search for missing cargo, and secure any threats. But in the center of it all stood Lyra, arms crossed, waiting. She didn't hide in a corner or return to her cage. She stood beside the human like an equal, her claws were tucked away, her breath steady. She wasn't sure what would happen next. But for the first time, she didn't feel afraid. An Alliance commander stepped forward, tall and stern. He looked at the reports. The damage, the injured guards, then his eyes landed on Lyra. The prisoner fought during the raid. He asked. She led the defense, said the transport officer. She protected civilians. Added a medic, she even helped repair power relays, whispered a young crew member. The commander raised an eyebrow, surprised, and she didn't. Bite anyone. Not a single one, the human said with a faint smile. Lyra stayed quiet, unsure if she should speak. Then she said softly, I don't want to go back to the cage. The commander looked at her, then at the human. You? Take responsibility for her, he asked. The man nodded. Yes, she's not the same girl she was when she came aboard. There was a long pause. Then the commander sighed. Very well, she will not be returned to prison, he said. But she must stay under your supervision. Any harm she causes is on you. The human didn't hesitate. I understand. Lyra stared at him, her chest tight. He had just chosen her again. Even when no one else believed, he still did. They left the transport ship together, walking into the cleaner, brighter halls of the Alliance vessel. Lyra looked around, feeling nervous. No one here knew her, not yet, but they weren't staring in fear. Not like before. Some nodded. Others stepped aside to let her pass. That was enough. For now, later. In a quiet cabin near the edge of the ship, Lyra sat on a soft bed. The human sat across from her, drinking tea. He had changed into cleaner clothes, but still looked like himself, simple, quiet, strong. She looked at her own hands. At the faint scars, the faded markings. I don't know what I'm supposed to be now, she said. You don't have to know yet, he replied. Just be someone who chooses. She nodded slowly. I used to think biting was the only way to survive, she said. But now, I want something else. He leaned back. What do you want? She thought hard, then said, I want peace. The word felt strange on her tongue. She had never said it out loud before. But the moment she did, it felt right. When the ship reached the colony planet days later, Lyra followed him down the landing ramp. The sky was wide and blue, the sun soft on her face. People walked through open markets. Children laughed near the trees. No one carried shock rods or energy whips. No one called her a monster. Here, she could start again. The human led her to a small home near the outer fields. It was simple, one level, quiet walls, and wind that carried the smell of green things. Inside, there was a table, a couch, and 2 rooms. She looked at him, confused. 2 rooms. One for me, one for you, he said. She blinked, then asked, not a cage. He smiled, not a cage. That night, she sat on the floor by the window. The stars were out, just like the ones she saw behind bars years ago. But now, there were no bars, no guards watching her, only quiet. And the sound of wind in the grass. The human placed a small blanket over her shoulders. You don't have to sleep on the floor, he said. I'm used to it, she replied. But maybe tomorrow, he nodded. Then walked away. Lyra hugged the blanket close, feeling warmth not just on her skin, but inside her chest. In the days that followed, she learned to walk through town without fear. She helped at the fields, fed animals, even played with some children. At first, they ran, afraid. But one brave girl offered Lyra a flower. Lyra bent down, took it gently, and smiled, not with teeth, but with eyes. The children returned the next day, and the next, they stopped calling her scary. They started calling her Miss Lyra. At night, she and the human would sit near the fire and talk, not about war, or pain, or cages, but about stars, about planting, about music and stories. They laughed sometimes, and Lyra began to smile. Real smiles, no sharp teeth, no growls, just quiet joy. One morning, she stood in the doorway, looking at the horizon. She turned to the man and said, You gave me a home. He looked up from his cup. "No," he said. "You made it one." And with that, the story of the biting girl ended not in chains, but in freedom, not in fear, but in peace. Her name was Lyra, and she would never be locked away again.